It has been a couple months since we checked in on our Stock Up, Stock Down series for the U.S. men's national team, and in that couple of months, we've had some players absolutely exploding onto the scene, and at the same time, some players that we were anticipating some big springs for, we have seen them, what's the opposite of exploding? I guess imploding. So we got a lot to unpack, so let's get into it on this episode of the Yank Report. What's up? My name is Sam. Welcome to the Yank Report, the show where we talk about the U.S. men's national team and U.S. soccer in America and all that good stuff. And if you're new here and you're into that kind of thing, please hit that subscribe button so you can check in with us again. And if you're in a good mood and you're feeling generous, please hit that like button. It helps out the channel so much, and I appreciate it from the bottom of my red, white, and blue heart. So first up with our stock up, and I think you guys saw this one coming a mile away. This is a guy who has seen his stock soar faster than just about any American I can recall in recent memory, and that is Daryl Dike. In just 14 games for championship side Barnsley, Daryl Dike has 8 goals, and it's not just the goals, it's the fact that Dike arrived at a mid-table championship side that was not really ambitious. Since Dike's arrival, Barnsley all of a sudden has ambitions for promotion. They are looking at the Premier League next season, and they are figuring out how they can possibly afford this American that only a few months ago, nobody saw this coming from. And I think that's the most important thing about this Daryl Dike situation. Not just how good he's been for Barnsley and the goals that he scored and the form he's in and all that. I think some perspective about where he's come from. Remember, 2 years ago, Daryl Dike was playing for the Virginia Cavaliers in college soccer in the U.S. He gets 1 season, 8 months in MLS. He puts together a season for Orlando City with 8 goals in 17 appearances. Off of that, he gets a call up to the national team in the January camp. He doesn't feature for the U.S. in the January camp. If the game was in Orlando, everybody was expecting him to start the game and have a big game, but he only gets a brief cameo. The next day, we find out he gets a loan move to Barnsley, and since arriving at Barnsley, he's been absolutely on fire. Now, the big rumor is that Orlando City has already turned down a $10 million bid and that they're looking for something a lot more. Don Garber came out recently with a quote that said that Daryl Dike is a $20 million player. I think that's the number that MLS has drawn in the sand that they want to get. It's pretty incredible that Daryl Dike, in the span of a couple of months, has gone from a quality young MLS forward fresh out of college to a potential $20 million striker that could be going to a Big Four league. Now, there's still a ton of question marks surrounding Dike. I mean, if you look at the soccer that Barnsley play, it's not the prettiest soccer. It's certainly not the positional soccer that Greg Berhalter looks for on the national team. And when he's been in national team camp, Greg Berhalter has criticized Dike's ability to pick up the system and to understand how to play the way that he wants his striker to play. Now, that being said, if you're a striker that scores goals every time you go out there, you're going to be able to see the field more often than not, regardless of how well you pick up the system. So as exciting as these last few months were for Dike, the next few months are even going to be more exciting because we're going to find out if he ends up playing in MLS this season, if he gets shipped out to a Big Four team, what that team's going to be, what's going to be expected of him. Is he going to arrive as a starter, or is he going to arrive as a project for some big club, a player with a lot of potential? Can he be as successful on a team that asks a little bit more from him than what Barnsley's currently doing with him right now, which is pretty much Route 1 stuff? All of his goals are pretty much either crosses or they just lump it up to him and he unleashes his cannon of a shot, or, you know, the Barnsley special where they just shoot the ball way in the air, it lands in the box, chaos ensues, and then somehow Dike scores a goal. Now on to our stock down, and I'm going to cheat a little bit for our stock down because it's not just one player. I think it's a category of players, and that is the players who were in the Olympic qualifying team that were expected to have big tournaments that potentially were going to be playing for the national team. And specifically, I'm talking about Sam Vines, I'm talking about Johnny Cardoso, Andres Perea, Sebastian Soto, and Jesus Ferreira. Now you may be wondering, is Jackson Ewell in that list? I don't know. Jackson Ewell had that good last game, so he's kind of in a different category. But a guy like Sam Vines, I've said before that he's potentially an outsider for a World Cup roster position because we're so thin at left back. So I was really hoping that Sam Vines would hit that World Cup qualifying tournament and not just be a quality player, which I think he was a quality player. I was expecting him to be a cut above, to show himself as one of the better players in the tournament and deserving for a look at that left back spot for the U.S. men's national team. Johnny Cardoso, I know a lot of us put our hopes on him, and even though he was played as an 8 and, people are saying he's playing out of position because he should be more of a deep-lying playmaker, even whenever he was on the ball, he didn't show that he was up to the level, and that's really disappointing for a guy that we had a lot of high hopes for coming in. Johnny's probably not going to be included in many U.S. men's national team senior camps anytime soon. Of course, he is a young guy. I believe he's still 19 years old, so he does have time to get better, but it certainly wasn't the performance we were looking for. The two strikers, Sebastian Soto and Jesus Ferreira. Jesus Ferreira came in with, Greg Berhalter and Jason Kreis just speaking so highly of him. He had some good U.S. men's national team senior camps, but what we saw from him, I believe he had 1 goal in the first game, and after that, we just didn't see a whole lot from him. He did that false 9 drop-in thing, but he wasn't really threatening in the box. Part of that may be on Kreis for just asking too much of the team. The other part might be on Ferreira for just not being a player at that level. You got to wonder, if Daryl Dike doesn't make that move to Barnsley and he's in this Olympic qualifier team, is he able to get goals? Is he more effective than Jesus Ferreira? And I would imagine that he would be. Now, the other striker on that team was Sebastian Soto, and I know Sebastian Soto is a fan favorite, and he's a guy that a lot of people are hoping could potentially be the starting striker for the U.S. men's national team. But we've seen that Soto hasn't played professional soccer in a long time. I mean, he's been bounced around. He's now at Norwich, and he's not even making the bench for Norwich's U23 team. He's in a really bad run of form right now. Of course, he had that major mistake in the Mexico game, but even beyond that, it just was not the tournament that I wanted to see from Sebastian Soto. I was hoping that he would show, some of that form that we saw from the U20 World Cup whenever we all got excited about him. But right now, Soto is a stock down for me, likewise with all those other guys from the Olympic qualifying tournament. Next, we have a stock up, and I think this was the big winner from the March friendlies, and I'm talking about Luca de la Torre. Now, de la Torre is a very interesting case. We've had a few guys come out of nowhere to hit the scene for the U.S. men's national team recently. I would say Daryl Dike is one of those guys. I would say Matthew Hoppe is one of those guys. But in a case like Luca de la Torre, he's not a new face. He's a guy that we saw feature for U.S. men's national team youth teams in the past. When Luca de la Torre was with Fulham, he was kind of in the team, out of the team. In the games that I watched with him, he didn't seem like physically up for the championship. He didn't seem really athletically there at the time, and he gets shipped out to Fulham, ends up at Heracles, and all of a sudden at Heracles, he seems to have found his level and has turned a corner in his career to figure out really how to be a professional that can contribute to the team. We see him in the March qualifiers. He was fantastic in both games whenever he featured for the U.S. men's national team, and he got fans buzzing. And to top off this monumental month for Luca de la Torre, he was named to the Eredivisie Team of the Month for March. So Luca de la Torre has gone from a guy that was, a forgotten prospect, a guy that we kind of wrote off as U.S. men's national team fans, to a guy that all of a sudden is right back in it. Now, where does Luca de la Torre feature in all of this? I'm not so sure. He can play on the outside as a winger, maybe in a spot sort of akin to what Brendan Aronson does as a 10 that cuts in. People, though, expect him to be more of like a box-to-box type midfielder. It will be interesting to see where he ends up. But I think Luca de la Torre is a great example of a player that really took his opportunity, seized it, and made something of it. I'm not sure that Luca de la Torre was originally one of Greg Berhalter's call-ups for those March friendlies. I wonder, if all of the players would have been available for both games, if de la Torre would have missed that opportunity. But it doesn't matter because he got that opportunity, he seized it, and he showed us all what he can do with his fantastic touch and his combination play, his ability to dribble out of press, his ability to carry the ball upfield. He did a lot of exciting things out there. And, one of the big comments that everybody had whenever they were watching him in the March friendlies was that he looked a lot like Brendan Aronson on the field, and it was hard to tell him apart. And that's a fantastic thing, considering the form that Brendan Aronson is in right now. And speaking of Brendan Aronson, although Brendan Aronson is certainly not our stock down, he is certainly involved in the story of our stock down. And our stock down, our final stock down, is going to be Jordan Morris. And I know that's a big bummer. And I know Jordan Morris is a fan favorite for a lot of people. I know Next Generation Soccer Pod really likes him. I know Kicking It with Drew, that's his favorite player. But unfortunately, Jordan got injured at just the worst possible time. Now, we know that a few years ago, Jordan was one of the best contributors for the U.S. men's national team. But all of a sudden, we have all these guys playing in Europe. We have all these young kids that are kind of coming good on their talent. And Jordan made that trip to Swansea City and was hoping to kind of put his name right back in the mix as a lockdown starter for the U.S. men's national team, or at least a lockdown contributor for the U.S. men's national team. But disaster strikes. He ends up with a major injury that's going to see him out for an extended period of time. And what happens whenever you're playing on a very quality national team and you're out for an extended period of time? It gives other guys opportunities. If you have Brendan Aronson, Christian Pulisic, Giovanni Reina, and Tim Weah, where do you put Jordan Morris? And, it's such a tough thing in sports because it's not like Jordan Morris has done anything wrong. And it's so unfair that through injury, he gets left out of the team. But in sports, it's important to never let your backup see the field. And unfortunately for Jordan, the U.S. men's national team has a lot of important fixtures coming up, especially this summer. And Morris is not going to be a part of them. And he's going to allow these other guys to come into the team and potentially solidify themselves. So whenever he does make it back to Seattle, he's going to have an uphill climb just to get back into this team. And for that reason, Jordan Morris, unfortunately, your stock is down. So guys, that's my list. I'm curious what you think. Did I miss out on some stock ups or some stock downs? Do you disagree with any of my assessments? And where do you think that Jordan Morris fits back in whenever he's healthy? Do you think he has a spot on this team? How do you think that all plays out? Please leave a comment with your thoughts in the comment section. If you speak Spanish, please leave a comment in Spanish. So puedo practicar mi español. If you're new here and you're still watching, please hit the subscribe button so we can see each other again. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. It helps out a lot. My name is Sam, and this is the Yank Report.